Ryan's office revenge.
I never thought spilling coffee on the wrong guy would cost me 16 years of my career. But there I was, 3 minutes later, standing in the lobby with a cardboard box pressed against my chest, while security politely waited for me to leave. My name is Theodore Banks. I'm 48 years old, and one clumsy collision with the CEO's son had just turned my entire life at Sterling West Capital upside down. His voice was still ringing in my ears. Sharp, entitled, absolutely certain when he shouted that I was fired. Now I stood where they'd left me, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. Inside the box were photos of my son at baseball practice, thank you notes from clients, and the Mont Blanc pen I'd bought myself after my first major deal. Everything else, my job, my office, my place in this building, had vanished faster than I could apologize for spilled coffee. You know how some moments change everything? This was one of those. 16 years building relationships, earning trust, making the firm money, gone because some spoiled kid couldn't handle getting his shirt dirty. Then the elevator chimed. Nicholas Ford stepped out, carrying that same steady presence he always had. This was the investor whose $800 million were supposed to anchor our next expansion, not small change, even in our business. He spotted me immediately. "Theodore," he said, like nothing was wrong. "Ready for our meeting?" I shifted the box in my arms. "I'm sorry, Nicholas, I just got fired." He blinked, processing words that didn't seem to compute. Then he did something I didn't expect. He laughed. Not mocking, more like a man who'd just had a hunch confirmed. He reached into his coat, pulled out his phone, and turned the screen toward me. There was Maxwell Reed, red-faced and furious, caught at some charity event looking like an angry teenager. "This the guy who fired you?" he asked. My stomach dropped. Something in his tone, almost relieved, definitely not surprised, told me that whatever had happened upstairs was just getting started. Despite feeling sick about losing my job, I sensed things were about to get interesting in ways my former employers never saw coming. Let me back up 3 hours to when this whole mess started. I'd been hurrying down the corridor with investor packets under my arm and fresh coffee in my hand. The morning was already running behind schedule, and this meeting with Nicholas Ford was critical for the firm. We'd been courting his investment for months. I rounded the corner too fast and walked straight into Maxwell Reed. Coffee went everywhere. All over his designer shirt, his silk tie, probably his ego too. "Are you kidding me, Theodore?" His voice shot up loud enough to freeze every analyst in the hallway. "Seriously? Right now?" "I'm sorry, Maxwell. Should have watched where I was going." I reached for napkins, but he slapped my hand away like I had some kind of disease. "Don't touch me," he snapped. "You think this is some kind of joke? Embarrassing me right before the biggest meeting of the quarter?" "Same meeting I was heading to," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice level. "Let me get you cleaned up. We can handle this." But Maxwell was just getting warmed up. "I don't want cleaning up. I want you to stop acting like you run this place. You walk around here like you built the firm yourself." I felt that familiar sting. Years of watching him resent every client who asked for me instead of him. Every time his father relied on my judgment over his enthusiasm. Every moment he had to watch some ex-Navy guy outperform the golden boy who'd never worked anywhere else. "Maxwell, it was an accident. We've got 15 minutes before Nicholas arrives." "No," he said, stepping closer, his voice getting louder with every word. "You can't handle anything anymore. You don't listen. You undermine me. You act like some hotshot because Daddy's not here to protect you." That one stung. My father had been dead for 5 years, but Maxwell knew how to hit where it hurt. "That's not fair," I said. He threw his hands up like he was addressing a crowd. "Do you know who my father is? You're fired, Theodore. Fired. Get out." The hallway went dead silent. 20 people watching the CEO's son have a public meltdown, and I was the target. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. This was the kind of moment that defines how people see you, and I knew they were all taking notes. HR showed up within minutes, drawn by the shouting like flies to honey. Miranda Foster, the HR manager, tried to smooth things over. "Let's step into a conference room and talk this through." Maxwell pointed at me like he was passing judgment. "Make it official. I want him out of the building." They didn't give me paperwork right then, just promises that documentation would follow. I nodded because my throat had stopped working. Under the humiliation, something was building in my chest, not just anger, something colder. Every analyst still watching knew exactly what they'd witnessed, even if none of them would say it out loud. I walked back to my office like a man heading to his execution. 16 years of work, and it would all have to fit in a cardboard box now. I stood there looking at empty shelves like they belonged to someone else. My nameplate still sat on the desk, but everything that mattered had to be packed up. I picked up the framed photo of my son Jake at his high school graduation last spring. Kid's a freshman at University of Colorado now, studying engineering like his old man wanted to. 3 more years of tuition ahead of us, and payments were due in 6 weeks. The timing couldn't have been worse. "This is completely insane," a voice said from the doorway. Caroline Wells from accounting stepped in and lowered her voice to a whisper. She'd been at the firm longer than anyone except the partners. Seen it all, knew where the bodies were buried. "He's been gunning for you for months, Theodore. Everyone knows it. This coffee thing just gave him an excuse." "Well, I spilled coffee," I said, trying to sound like it didn't matter. "Guess that was enough." She shook her head. Could have been anything. Sneezing at the wrong time, looking at him sideways. He wants his college buddy in your chair, that Preston kid who couldn't analyze his way out of a paper bag. I let out a slow breath. It's done now. Caroline gave me a quick hug and disappeared before anyone noticed she'd stopped by. Smart woman. No point in getting on Maxwell's bad side when he was feeling his power. I kept packing. The silver pen my father gave me when I left the Navy and decided to try finance. The small bronze eagle Nicholas had brought back from a conference in Germany. Said it reminded him of my military background. A stack of handwritten notes from clients thanking me for protecting their money when other advisors wanted them to chase fool's gold. Each item felt heavier than it should have, like I was packing up more than just office supplies. I was packing up my identity, my purpose, my plan for the future. Gabriel Woods knocked on the doorframe. He'd been head of security since before I started here, knew everybody's story, treated everyone with respect regardless of their title. "Theodore," he said gently, "they want me to walk you out. Company policy." "I understand, Gabriel." He nodded toward the box. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait outside. Professional but human. That's how you handle a bad situation with dignity." When I finally stepped into the hallway, Gabriel walked beside me but kept his distance. Not making a show of it, just doing his job with class. In the lobby, he paused. "You need a minute before heading out. Nobody's going to bother you. Take your time." I held the box tighter. The meeting with Nicholas felt impossible now, but disappearing without explanation felt even worse. I stood there, not sure what came next, when that familiar voice cut through the noise behind me. "Theodore, there you are." I turned and saw Nicholas Ford making his way through the lobby with his usual easy stride. He looked at me, then at the cardboard box, and his expression changed. "Theodore," he said quietly, "tell me this isn't what it looks like." I couldn't meet his eyes. "Got fired this morning." "For what?" His voice stayed calm, but something shifted underneath. "Maxwell." I spilled coffee on him. He made a scene. Nicholas let out a slow breath that sounded more disappointed than surprised. I had a feeling something was off. Been getting mixed signals for weeks. Then this morning, someone from the firm sent an email saying today's meeting was canceled. My head snapped up. Canceled? Nobody told me that. That's exactly why I came in person. I wanted to see who was lying to me. That hit home. For the first time since the shouting started, I felt my spine straighten. It wasn't me. "I know," he said, studying my face. "Your work was never the problem, Theodore. The problem is their leadership. I needed to confirm it before making any big decisions. No accusation in his tone, just clarity, like he'd been putting together puzzle pieces for months, and this was the final one clicking into place." "Walk with me," Nicholas said, nodding toward the doors. "We should talk somewhere with less audience." I glanced at Gabriel, who gave me a small nod of encouragement. Nicholas held the door open. "Let's get away from all this circus." We crossed the street to Murphy's Cafe, a place where business conversations stayed private and the coffee was better than the corporate swill anyway. I set the cardboard box beside me like evidence of everything that had just blown up. Nicholas folded his hands on the table and got straight to business. "Theodore, I didn't come here today to finalize anything. I came because Sterling West has been throwing up red flags for months." I looked at him, not sure where this was heading. "Sudden restructuring announcements that make no sense," he continued. "Financial reports that contradict earlier statements. Expansion proposals that look impressive on paper but fall apart when I ask basic questions. Every trail leads back to Maxwell. Something clicked in my head. You think he's been manipulating the numbers? I think he's desperate to prove he belongs in a room he's not ready for. And desperate people make dangerous decisions. Nicholas leaned back slightly. I needed to know if this firm still deserved a partner willing to place $800 million under their management. After today, I have my answer. I felt the ground shift under me, but in a good way this time. He didn't fire me because of the coffee. He fired you because you've seen too much. He was worried you'd tell me what's really going on. Nicholas nodded like that matched exactly what he'd been thinking. Then he leaned forward. Tell me what you've observed. Off the record. I hesitated for about 2 seconds. Loyalty had been drummed into me in the Navy and carried over into my financial career. But loyalty is supposed to work both directions. There are decisions being made that don't make sense for the company's health, I said quietly. And they all start with Maxwell. Nicholas's jaw tightened. Start wherever you want. I set the box on the floor and put both hands on the table. Maxwell's been pushing expansion deals the firm can't sustain. New markets where we have zero presence, no research foundation, no local contacts. When I questioned the risk assessments, he told me to stay in my lane. What else? He tried to alter risk calculations on at least 3 major portfolios. When I caught the inconsistencies and asked about them, he claimed it was some new methodology he'd learned at a seminar. But the numbers didn't follow any accepted standards. When I refused to sign off, he stopped including me in strategy meetings. Nicholas nodded once. Go on. There were emails. Got copied on one by mistake last month. It outlined a plan to restructure senior staff who didn't align with his vision for aggressive growth. I was at the top of that list, right above 2 other guys who've been here longer than Maxwell's been alive. That explains more than you might realize. How so? Another investor, Peterson Group, pulled out 3 weeks ago. No explanation, just said they were reassessing their portfolio strategy. Now I suspect they saw the same warning signs you did. A chill went through me. My firing wasn't just about spilled coffee and a bad temper. It was part of a bigger picture I was only now starting to see. He also wanted me to change how we communicate with potential clients, I added. Tone down the risk disclosures. Focus on upside potential. Leave out the technical details until after commitments were signed. Nicholas's face went hard. That's not just unethical. In some cases, it could be fraud. The word hung in the air between us. We both knew what that meant for a firm's future. Nicholas sat back, and I could see him making calculations in his head. Not financial ones, strategic ones. Theodore, I've watched you handle crisis situations for years. You never cut corners to make a deal look better. You never hid risks to close faster. People like you don't just manage investments, you protect them. That's what the job requires. No, he said, that's what integrity requires. And integrity is a lot rarer than capital these days. He paused, and I could feel something important coming. I'm withdrawing my $800 million from Sterling West. Not next quarter, not next month, this week. My breath caught. Nicholas, he held up a hand. I'm not finished. I plan to use that same capital to build something new, an investment group based on transparency and sound judgment, not ego projects and creative accounting. And I want you to run it with me. The words hit me like a truck. Run it, executive director. Full authority to build the team you want, set the standards you believe in, work with clients who value honesty over salesmanship. I stared at my hands, feeling everything I thought I knew about my future rearranging itself. 16 years of building something at Sterling West, and they'd thrown me out over coffee and a spoiled kid's tantrum. Now this. You don't have to answer today, Nicholas said. Sleep on it. Think about your son, what this could mean for his future. Think about what you could build if nobody was looking over your shoulder, second-guessing every ethical decision you make. I looked up and found him watching me with quiet confidence. He'd already made his choice. The next one was mine. What would you call this new firm? I asked. He smiled. I was thinking Apex Financial Partners. Clean slate, clear mission. The name felt right, like a fresh start instead of just another job. Can I ask you something? I said. Shoot. How long have you been planning this? Nicholas chuckled. About 6 months. I just needed the right partner and the right reason to pull the trigger. Today I got both. By the next morning, Nicholas had already put his plan into motion. My phone started buzzing at 7 a.m. with texts from former colleagues, each one more panicked than the last. Before I could even make coffee, Nicholas called. It's done. The full $800 million withdrawal notice hit their desk an hour ago. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in yesterday's clothes. How'd they take it? About like you'd expect. Panic mode. Jonathan Reed called me personally within 20 minutes, wanting to know what went wrong. What'd you tell him? That his son fired the one person I trusted to manage risk properly, and that I don't do business with firms that make personnel decisions based on spilled coffee. I had to smile at that. Within a few hours, word was spreading through Denver's financial district like wildfire. Emergency board meetings, senior partners scrambling to figure out why their biggest investor had walked away without warning, analysts trying to calculate what an $800 million withdrawal would do to the firm's stability. Maxwell tried to get ahead of the story with damage control. He sent out an internal email claiming I'd mismanaged key investor relationships and that he'd had to make difficult decisions to protect the firm's interests. Painted himself as the hero trying to save everyone from my incompetence. That backfired spectacularly. Nicholas forwarded Maxwell's email to me with a short note. Watch this. Then he sent that same email to the board, along with documentation he'd been quietly keeping for months. Screenshots of meeting cancellations Maxwell had made without authorization. Records of emails where he'd tried to route all investor communications through himself. Evidence of the pressure campaign to get me and other senior staff sidelined. Every manipulation attempt was right there in black and white. I called my son Jake that afternoon to give him the news. College kids are usually pretty resilient, but I could hear the worry in his voice when I told him I'd lost my job. Dad, what about tuition? I can take out more loans, maybe get a work-study job. Don't worry about that, I said. Something else might be opening up. Something better. You sound different. Less stressed than I thought you'd be. Smart kid. Sometimes getting pushed out of the wrong place leads you to the right one. He laughed. That sounds like something Grandpa would have said. My father had been full of sayings like that. Military wisdom wrapped in simple language. I missed his voice, especially on days like this when everything felt upside down. How's the engineering program going? I asked, changing the subject. Good. Really good. Professor Martinez said my calculus scores are in the top 10% of the class. Pride in his voice. That made everything else worth it. Your grandfather would be proud. He always said you had the best brain in the family. We talked for another 20 minutes about classes, friends, his part-time job at the campus bookstore. Normal father-son stuff that reminded me why I was fighting to build something stable. By Wednesday, the board had called an emergency session. Nicholas's documentation had been circulating among the senior partners for 2 days. Nobody was defending Maxwell anymore. Nobody could. Caroline called me around noon. Theodore, you need to know what's happening over here. It's complete chaos. How bad? 3 more clients have requested their files be transferred to other firms. 2 of the junior partners are updating their resumes. And Maxwell, she paused. Maxwell's been locked in his father's office for the past hour. We can hear shouting through the walls. That afternoon, my phone lit up with a text from Gabriel. He's gone, Theodore. Made it official. Security escort and everything. Maxwell Reed had been walked out of the same lobby where I'd stood just 3 days earlier, holding a cardboard box and trying to figure out what had hit me. This time, though, people weren't looking away. They were watching every step, and some of them weren't trying to hide their satisfaction. Funny how quickly things can flip. By the end of the week, Sterling West looked like a completely different company. A restructuring announcement went out Friday morning, followed by a carefully worded memo saying that Jonathan Reed would be transitioning to an advisory role while the board searched for new leadership. Nobody believed the transition was voluntary. When you lose your biggest investor and have to fire your own son in the same week, shareholders start asking hard questions about leadership and judgment. Maxwell's name began showing up in conversations around Denver's financial district, but not in a good way. I heard someone at the grocery store call it the coffee crisis. Another guy at the gas station mentioned that Reed kid who got himself fired, like it was already becoming local legend. Former colleagues started reaching out, some carefully testing the waters, others more directly. Caroline was first. I wanted to thank you, she said when she called, for standing up to him, for not backing down. We all saw what he was doing, but nobody else had the spine to say anything. A junior analyst sent me a LinkedIn message. You didn't destroy anything, Mr. Banks. You just exposed what was already broken. Their words meant more than they probably realized. For days, I'd been wondering if I'd done the right thing, if maybe I should have just kept my head down and played politics. But sometimes standing up for what's right costs you in the short term and pays off later. Nicholas and I met at his temporary office space the following Monday. He had papers spread across a conference table and that look of focused energy I'd seen when he was putting together major deals. "This is the formal partnership agreement," he said, sliding a folder across to me. "Executive Director, 40% equity stake, full authority to hire the team and set company standards." My hands were steadier this time as I read through the terms. Better than steady, excited. "There's something else," Nicholas said. "I've already gotten calls from 4 potential clients." Word travels fast when you do business the right way. I looked up from the contract. "Anyone I know?" "Peterson Group, for starters. Remember them? They pulled out of Sterling West last month." I remembered. "They want to work with us?" "They want to work with you, specifically. Seems they did their homework on who was actually managing risk over there and who was just taking credit for it." I signed the papers, and it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. That weekend, I drove down to Boulder to see Jake. Brought him the news in person this time, along with a pizza and the promise that tuition payments weren't going to be a problem anymore. "So you're starting your own firm?" he asked, eyes wide. "Partnership, with the guy who saw what was really happening and decided to bet on integrity over politics." Jake grinned. "Dad, that's incredible. Grandpa would have said you landed on your feet." He would have. My father had always believed that doing the right thing eventually pays off, even when it costs you up front. Took 48 years and a cup of spilled coffee, but I was finally starting to understand what he meant. On my first morning at Apex Financial Partners, I found myself thinking back to that lobby at Sterling West. The marble floor, the cardboard box pressed against my chest, the sick feeling that everything I'd built was falling apart. At the time, it felt like my career was ending. Turns out it was just getting started. Nicholas had found us office space in Lodo. Nothing fancy but professional. Clean lines, good natural light, room to grow. The kind of place where you focus on work instead of impressing people with expensive furniture. "This is yours to shape however you want," he said, gesturing around the main conference room. "Start wherever you think the foundation needs to be strongest." I settled into the chair that still felt new. "I want everyone on the team to understand why honesty matters here. Nobody gets shut down for asking hard questions or raising concerns about a deal. That's exactly why I chose you," Nicholas said. "No grand speeches, just quiet confidence." Later that morning, our first potential hire walked through the door. Diana Cooper had been an analyst at Sterling West years ago before moving to a smaller firm downtown. Smart, thorough, the kind of person who caught details other people missed. "I heard you're building something different here," she said, looking around the office. "That's the plan. No politics, no games, just good work with people you can trust." "Then I want in," she said without hesitation. Over the next few weeks, we brought in 3 more people. All experienced, all carrying their own stories about firms that valued connections over competence. By month's end, we had our core team and our first major client account, Peterson Group, who'd done their homework on exactly who had been making the smart calls at Sterling West. Turns out, when you build something on the right foundation, it grows faster than you expect. The real satisfaction came about 6 months later. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Caroline called with an update on Sterling West. "They're barely hanging on," she said. "Lost 4 more major accounts last month. Jonathan Reed officially stepped down as CEO last week. The board brought in some consulting firm to try and salvage what's left." "What about Maxwell? Haven't seen him around the financial district. Heard he moved to California. Something about exploring new opportunities in tech." Good luck with that, I thought. Tech companies are even less forgiving of incompetence than financial firms. "How are things with you?" Caroline asked. "Can't complain. We just signed our biggest client yet. $200 million portfolio management deal. Guy specifically asked for the team that knows how to protect money instead of just promising big returns. That client turned out to be connected to 3 others, who were connected to 4 more. Funny how quickly word spreads when you do right by people. Within a year, we were managing over $500 million in assets and getting calls from prospects we'd never even heard of. Jake came home for Thanksgiving that fall, midway through his sophomore year. Kid had grown up over the past few months, more confident, more focused on his goals. Over dinner, he asked the question I'd been expecting. "Dad, do you ever regret what happened?" I mean, you spent so many years building something at Sterling West. I thought about it for a minute. You know what I learned, son? Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is getting pushed out of the wrong place. I spent 16 years trying to make something work that was never going to work, not with people like Maxwell calling the shots. But didn't you feel angry about losing all that time? For a while, yeah. But then I realized I didn't lose anything that mattered. The experience, the relationships, the reputation I'd built, that all came with me. What I left behind was the politics and the frustration and the constant fighting to do things the right way. Jake nodded, turning that over in his head. Grandpa used to say something about that, how sometimes you have to lose the wrong thing to find the right thing. My father's wisdom, passed down through another generation. He did say that. Took me 48 years to really understand what he meant. The second year was even better than the first. We moved to a bigger office, hired 4 more people, and started getting recognition in industry publications. Not for flashy returns or aggressive growth strategies, but for consistent performance and client satisfaction. The kind of reputation that takes decades to build, but lasts forever once you have it. I ran into Jonathan Reed at a Chamber of Commerce event about 18 months after everything went down. He looked older, tired around the eyes. We exchanged polite greetings, and I could tell he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. Finally, he cleared his throat. Theodore, I owe you an apology for how things ended, for not seeing what Maxwell was doing sooner. Water under the bridge, Jonathan. Hope things are working out for you. He shook his head. I should have listened to you about those risk assessments. Should have seen that he wasn't ready for the responsibility I kept giving him. Sometimes we learn the hard way. Both of us. He extended his hand. I heard good things about Apex Financial. Glad to see you landed on your feet. We shook hands and I could see he meant it. No hard feelings, just a man who'd learned some expensive lessons about leadership and family business. Looking back now, 3 years later, I can say with certainty that getting fired for spilling coffee was the best thing that ever happened to my career. Not because losing a job is fun, it's not, but because it forced me to stop settling for a situation that was never going to get better. Here's what I learned that might help other guys my age who find themselves in similar spots. First, your reputation and relationships matter more than your title or your office. Those things travel with you wherever you go. Second, integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when people are watching. It's about building a foundation that can support whatever comes next. And third, sometimes the biggest risk is staying comfortable in the wrong place instead of taking a chance on something better. At 51 now, running a firm that's built on the principles I always believed in, working with people I respect and trust, I can honestly say I wouldn't change how things worked out. Even the coffee spill, especially the coffee spill, because sometimes life has to knock you down before you realize you were meant to be standing somewhere else entirely. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened for you.